We hope everyone is doing well. We will get started. Thanks to many people that have joined so far. My name is Begit Mbangala. I'm the CEO for ProComm Technologies. For making time to join this webinar today, as we are speaking about vulnerability management with one of our vendor partners, TENABLE. As ProComm Technologies, we continue to deliver cybersecurity solutions. We continue to partner with you, our valued clients, and we hope this session today will also be valuable and offer you a solution that you require as you continue to build your cybersecurity resilience. As ProComm Technologies, for the benefit of those that might be joining this session for the first time, we are a managed solutions provider. We offer managed services. As ProComm, we strive to offer solutions that augment all the solutions that you are implementing internally as organizations. We're there to support you, and we continue to continuously research and find out what are the cutting-edge technologies that are out there that can also help your organization. We continue to add value to businesses that we work with and partner with you in your digital transformation strategies. Some of the solutions that we offer as ProComm around 4 key areas under managed security, managed services. And we offer managed networking solutions. We're helping organizations adopt SD-WAN. So if you have a requirement around SD-WAN technology, let us know. We offer solutions in unified communications or telephony services. We're currently helping organizations that want to use Microsoft Teams direct routing. So if you have Microsoft Teams and you would like to be able to call out to the PSTN or integrate your Microsoft Teams with your PBX or IP telephony systems, we have a solution for you. We're also offering a cloud contact center. If you have a requirement for cloud contact center solutions and customer engagement platforms, we're able to help you with that. And obviously, with the advent of cloud, customers are looking at adopting public cloud, AWS and Microsoft Azure. Our belief is that organizations are going to go hybrid, meaning you're going to have some workloads in the cloud and some workloads on-prem. We help customers with cloud readiness assessments, migration to the cloud, and also deploying private cloud for those that want to build private clouds. So you can get in touch with us. We'll be able to help. Today, we're looking at cybersecurity. And there are a number of cybersecurity solutions that we offer as ProComm. And today, we're going to be talking to one of them, which is vulnerability management. These are some of the key vendors that we represent. And as ProComm, our belief is always to maintain skills that are able to deliver these solutions. So it's not about just us selling you a solution from this vendor, but we have certified, skilled people who are able to support these environments. So if you have any requirement around any one of these vendors, please speak to us and we'll be able to assist you. Speaking of cybersecurity, cybersecurity landscape continues to grow, and we know how complex it can be, and most organizations are looking for solutions. Any organization today must be able to identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover from cybersecurity threats. And organizations are putting a lot of investment in different tools to equip them to be able to identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover to cyber threats. As ProComm Technologies, there are a number of solutions that we are offering. And one of the key pillars of this is to identify the threats in your environment. And one of the solutions is vulnerability management. And this is the solution that we're going to be talking to you about today as with TENABLE, one of our partners. So these are a number of solutions that we as ProComm are offering, underpinned by our SOC as a service solution. So we are able to offer you 24/7 managed threat detection and response service. It is no longer enough just to build defensive technologies or cybersecurity technologies, but it is also important now to be proactive and have offensive tactics to protect your organizations against cyber threats. And we are able to offer you a 24/7 managed threat detection and response service through our Security Operations Center, and a number of other solutions that we also are offering. And we'll be happy to speak to you about any one of these that are showing. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Pierre from TENABLE, who will take us through the presentation today. And hopefully it will be valuable to you, and we'll be happy to engage with you after this presentation on one-to-one basis. If you have a special requirement, we'll be able to set up a session with you and TENABLE, and we look into your requirements. If you have any questions, please type them in and on the chat window, and we'll address them at the end. Thank you so much. Over to you, Pierre.
So first of all, thank you very much for the ProComm team. Thank you for organizing this webinar. As Becky introduced me, I'm from TENABLE. I'm the territory manager for TENABLE for the SADC region. And on the call as well is Christo Estreisen, who's my SE dedicated for the SADC region. And just a little bit of history around my career and what I've done over the last 20 years or 22 years. I've worked for vendors like Dell, IBM, Oracle, etc. And I know that the investment that customers like yourselves make into infrastructure, etc., is significant. And we all know that cyber is a buzzword in the market, and that companies are investing more and more money into cyber security. And it's extremely important to make sure that we protect the environments that we have. And today the presentation is basically around TENABLE and what we do from a cyber exposure perspective. As Becky indicated, we're a cyber exposure organization. We're very well known for a product that we released about 20 or 22 years ago called Nessus. And since then, the company has advanced quite a lot. We've made quite a few acquisitions, and I'm going to take you quickly through the presentation. So in every organization, there is silos, right? And in those silos, we understand that from a SADC perspective, a lot of our customers have on-prem environments, but there's also a big move to cloud, and hopefully when government legislation and everything changes within the region, you guys will be able to access or use the cloud environments like our colleagues in South Africa are doing. So from a cyber exposure perspective, we understand that environments are rapidly growing, right? Investment in infrastructure is not stopping. Demands from customers are increasing, and keeping up with demand and making sure that we deliver customer satisfaction across the board is extremely important, right? So from a marketing perspective, our marketing departments are connected to data centers. You know, we've got web applications, we've got Active Directory, we've got public cloud, and we've got internet-facing assets. Now, all these silos are extremely important because when we look at what's happening globally from a cyber attack perspective or breaches that are happening globally, it happens in all these silos. So an example that we always use when we do presentations is in 2021, in December, a vulnerability was identified called Log4j or Log4Shell. And from a Tenable perspective, all our customers started phoning us to say, how do we scan for Log4j specifically within our environment? So we have a big research team at Tenable. If you were a Tenable customer, within 24 hours, we could lodge a tactical scan within your environment, and we could scan specifically for Log4j within your environment. We know about the lapses group that focuses on Active Directory, and they basically enter Active Directory via social engineering. And we'll see lateral movements within Active Directory, try and find a persona within an organization that have access to either data center or important customer information that these people can take and sell on the black market, or switch off data centers, etc. We also have OT. Now, OT is basically for water utilities, power utilities, airlines, etc. So when I started 22 years ago, we started talking about consolidation. And if you look at the entire Tenable portfolio, you look at all those silos, you'll see that there's a lot of competitors within those silos. And what we do from a CISO perspective, if we're talking to executives, directors, or CEOs or CIOs, we talk about consolidation of your security products. And the reason why we're doing that is because we want to remove complexity out of the environment. We understand that from a security perspective or security personnel within your organization, the teams are generally not that big. And having skill set in every single silo is always a challenge. And then also taking this information that you get from all these third-party vendors and consolidating it and putting it in front of a CISO to give an indication of what the cyber exposure is from an organization is always a bit tricky. So it's always, I say, a thumb suck in terms of this is where we are, and measuring what the security teams are doing on a day-to-day basis is extremely difficult. So if we look at global trends and what's happening globally, 75% of organizations are pursuing security vendor consolidation. In 2022, it was up for 29% from 2020, and over half of the organizations, in fact, almost 60%, are now working with 10 different security vendors. So consolidating it in within 10 security vendors, so that we make sure we have the skill set in our organizations that can deliver exact results to executives and directors. And the reason for that is just to improve risk posture, to make sure that we have a holistic view of our organization and the information that we're supplying to the executives or the directors within the organization is accurate information. And we also make sure that the security teams are focusing on the important things. Now, how do we do that? First of all, we would install Tenable within your environment, and then we will launch a scan to make sure that we cover the entire environment. So there's no blind spots, and we make sure that from a security perspective, we have a holistic view of the entire organization. Now, once we've done a host asset discovery scan, which means we identify everything within your organization that has an IP address, we then come up with CVSS scoring, right? So CVSS scoring is your common vulnerability scoring system. And generally, when we do this for the first time within organizations, we find thousands and thousands of vulnerabilities. Now, the challenge that organizations have is, where do we start? What do we focus on that's important? And within Tenable, we have our own scoring system. We have a VPR system, which is a vulnerability priority rating. And that basically is just based on our research team, what is being exploited globally, when was the last time that it was exploited globally, and we then internally within Tenable give it a rating system. For instance, if you have a Log4j vulnerability within your environment, we will give it a high score because we know it's being exploited. It's being exploited on a daily basis. And then we have asset criticality rating. An asset criticality rating is basically how many vulnerabilities do we find on an asset? Is that asset a public-facing asset or is it an internal-facing asset? Based on that, we will give it a scoring system as well. And then the last one is an asset exposure score, which basically uses AI and machine learning and does a combination between vulnerability priority rating and asset criticality rating. And we filter the scoring system then. And if you have, for instance, 15 or 17,000 vulnerabilities within your environment, if we apply a filter on the TENABLE scoring system, we can reduce that to about 700 or 1,000 vulnerabilities, depending on your environment and the size of your environment. And then what we do is we either integrate into your existing ticketing system, or we use a ticketing system within the platform. We create a remediation project. And then once we've created a remediation project, we give it a timeline and we mail it to the teams that are responsible for doing the remediation. And what we then do is we basically measure those timelines. The system is intelligent enough that when it scans your environment and remediation has taken place, the system will pick that up automatically and will give you a progress report in terms of the project that you've just launched. Now, what that does is it immediately reduces your cyber risk. It gives visibility to executives and directors around what we're doing from an organization perspective to reduce cyber risk. And we also then, make sure that the security team is focusing on the things that are important and not running around and doing remediation on things that are not being exploited globally, hasn't been exploited for quite some time, etc. Once we've done that, the system has a executive summary report that's automated. We can automate that to be sent to the director or the board members on a monthly basis. And that will give you a view of where you started in terms of you just bought TENABLE, you had 20,000 vulnerabilities, your cyber exposure score was a certain percentage. And based on that and the remediation that's taking place on a monthly basis, you can track on what the teams are doing to reduce the cyber exposure. So in a nutshell, TENABLE is really not a complicated product. It's fairly easy to use. We do offer training for the teams, etc. And we basically speak around the challenges that organizations are facing on a daily basis. So as I indicated, Nessus was the product that we started with 20 years ago. A lot of organizations still use it. If you do audits within your organizations, KPMG and EY and those guys, they normally use Nessus to come and do a sort of a vulnerability assessment, and they give you a view or a snapshot or a point in time view of what your organization looks like now. And then based on that information, you can then go out and do the remediation, etc. If you're a TENABLE customer, you get those audit scans within the platform. It's free, so it all comes with the platform. And you can do those audit scans up front, and that will give you a clear indication of what these guys will find when they do come into your environments and do scans, etc. So what are the challenges that organizations are facing? First of all, resource constraints. We understand that security teams are not big, so it's difficult and challenging for these security teams to try and manage vulnerabilities within the environment. There's a whole bunch of assets within an organization, different platforms, IBM, Microsoft, Linux. We have different attack techniques that changes on a daily basis, people finding new ways to infiltrate companies like yourselves. And we see that a lot more in SADC now than we've seen about a year ago. And I think the reason for that is the team that we have in the UK and the team that we have in South Africa, they have these vulnerability solutions already in place. So people go and target organizations that don't have solutions in place, organizations that have no vulnerability management. So they'll target those organizations first. And I think if we've learned something from COVID, all of a sudden we had remote workers, and how do we protect those remote workers and check what is happening with those specific systems that guys are using from home? How do we scan those laptops, workstations, etc.? And then regulatory frameworks, GDPR, etc., whether that's international or local, how do you keep up with these regulatory frameworks? And the solutions from a Tenable perspective is quite simple, right? Number one is we've got the vulnerability management solution, whether that's on-prem or cloud. We have two solutions. If you are busy with a 5-year roadmap of how you're moving to cloud, we can either do, the on-prem environment now and smoothly transition you to cloud if required. And we also look at web application scanning. So if you have a web app, we basically crawl through your HTTP, look at all the web pages that you do have, find any vulnerabilities there, and then give you clear indication of how you remediate your web application. We've got cloud security, so posture management, making sure that infrastructure is cloud before you launch into cloud, that everything is, clear, that you've scanned it, there's no vulnerabilities, and you can launch your applications in cloud. We've got OT, so operational technology, making sure we scan those environments within power utilities. Everything is connected these days to the data center. So if a power utility is connecting to the data center, those big machines providing power, is there any vulnerabilities there where people can attack those specific technologies and switch off power utilities or water utilities? There was an incident in the US where they switched off a water supply and basically, asked for a ransom in terms of just switching it back on again. Attack surface management, anything that is internet facing. So we put in your URL and we'll find anything that has logged to your URL that is internet facing. And there we would identify things like, should it be on the internet? Why is it on the internet? Can we scan it? Are you aware of that? And that basically just speaks around making sure that there's no blind spots or, individual things that people can target to get into the organization. And then I think the last one is Active Directory, which is a extremely important one. And what we do from an Active Directory perspective is we first scan your Active Directory and we look at configuration of Active Directory. So we know that Active Directory is normally inherited by organizations. When we walk into customers and speak to security teams, the person that installed Active Directory has always left the company a long time ago. I don't think I've ever met somebody that installed Active Directory. So making sure Active Directory is configured correctly is extremely important. So we will give you clear guidance of what's wrong with your configuration of Active Directory, how to fix it, give you a very clear guideline of how to fix the configuration issues within Active Directory. Once we've done that, we then monitor Active Directory in real time. And that would be password spraying, escalation in privileges, all those type of things. We would monitor and give you alerts if anything happens. And then thirdly, we have a very nice tool that sort of gives you an indication of what we call blast radius. So if I put in the lady that works in reception's email address and I put in the CEO's email address, is there a path that I can use if I get into the reception lady's Active Directory? Is there a path to move to the CEO's Active Directory? And then once I'm in the CEO's Active Directory, of course, I have access to the entire organization, financials, HR, data centers, etc. So that's a very important one. And what we do from a Tenable perspective is, if we don't go for everything, and I'll explain to you what I mean by everything, there is a clear roadmap to make sure that we can monitor your environment from an holistic perspective. So our enterprise platform the biggest product you can buy from Tenable is called Tenable One. And basically Tenable One looks at all the silos at the bottom. We license it per year or for 3 years, depending on what the requirement is from a customer perspective. So for instance, if you have 1,000 IPs within your data center workforce, you're looking at switches, anything that within that has an IP address, we'll license that. We look at web apps. If you have 5 web applications, we look at identity, so Active Directory, how many active users you have. We will combine all those licenses together, and we will give you let's say for an example, 1,700 Tenable One licenses. And what Tenable One then does is Tenable One gives you access to all the platforms at the bottom, and it aggregates all that data, applies AI and machine learning to it, and then we can give you things like asset inventory. Right? So asset inventory, we have a view of everything that is within your environment. If somebody plugs a device within your network, it will give you an alert. Should this be on the network? Do you want to scan it? Yes, I want to scan it. We scan it, we make sure there's no vulnerabilities on that specific asset, and then we can launch it and load the applications, etc., within your environment. Then we have Lumen. Now, Lumen is a product that applies analytics in your environment, and basically Lumen then gives you a view that measures you across global organizations that does exactly the same thing as you. So if you're a financial institution, Lumen will measure you against all the other Tenable financial institutions that we have, and it will give you a scoring system for your environment, and will give you a scoring system for other financial institutions globally, and you can do a comparison in terms of where you are from a cyber exposure perspective versus what the standard is across financial institutions globally. What's really nice about Lumen is Lumen will give you a summary of what you need to do within your environment to reduce your cyber exposure immediately. For instance, if you apply a Microsoft patch across your environment, you will reduce your cyber exposure by 10%, 15%, 16%, etc. So that's a very nice tool to use as a CISO to just compare you against de facto standards across similar organizations globally. And then the last one is attack path analysis. Attack path analysis is a preventative way of showing you how people can breach your organization. So normally when we deal with customers that had a breach, there's an audit internally, and then a whole bunch of auditors try and figure out how the people entered the organization, how did they move to Active Directory, what they did in Active Directory, how did they move between individuals within Active Directory, and eventually found a Active Directory a person, and then stole information, etc. Attack path analysis is a preventative way of showing you what would happen and how to prevent that from happening. So, and this basically just goes around risk prioritization, right? Making sure that we have an holistic view of the entire organization from a security perspective, the security teams, etc., making sure that they're focusing on the right things, but also from a CISO, CEO perspective. I always say to our customers, it's difficult to show value to CEOs and CISOs around cybersecurity products, but this is a great way of doing it. It's a great way of showing CEOs and CISOs of what the security teams are doing to prevent any breaches happening within an organization and reducing cyber exposure. So from a Tenable One perspective, then we can do cyber exposure cards. So if you have geolocations, which means you have offices within the region, different countries, we can give you visibility of that specific environment as an exposure scorecard. We can also do environments. So we can go and create an exposure scorecard for a Microsoft environment, a Linux environment, the data center, or branches within your region, and that will give you an indication of what those environments look like, what they should focus on. And those environments will have visibility specifically for the environments. So the Microsoft team will only see their Microsoft environment. The Linux team will only see their Linux environment, etc. But from a executive or director perspective, you will have an holistic view of the entire organization. I spoke about, the exposure score. So this is Lumen Exposure View, and that will give you a view of where do we stand as an organization, how's our score trending against organizations globally, and what is our program maturity in terms of if we compare it to other customers globally. Asset inventory, full visibility into all your assets, and that includes, your vulnerability management, WAS, Active Directory, etc., depending on what your need and requirement is now. And we can create those tags with those exposure scorecards. And the reason why, I always say to customers, even when I was working for Dell and for IBM, etc., is if you want to buy a vulnerability management solution, go onto Google, go and look at who's the #1 in the world. You always want to work with who's the best in the world. If you look at IDC, we've been #1 globally for the last 3 years. This year will be the 4th year. And we get recognized, obviously, for the things we do around Active Directory, the research team behind everything that we do, that you have access to immediately. Anything that they find, new vulnerabilities that is identified, those are available to you as a Tenable customer within 24 hours when it's released, right? Our research team are constantly researching around what's happening globally, and you have access to that as a Tenable customer. Now, there's 2 business models here, and I had a quick chat with the ProComm team that I've worked with in the past as well. The 2 options are basically an outright purchase of Tenable, and some of the customers want to change that from a CapEx spend to an OpEx model. And as Becky indicated, we have a managed services partner program where we allow or give access to ProComm, where they can sell these solutions to you, but they manage it on your behalf. They will scan your environment. They will send those reports to you and give you an indication of what you should remediate, etc. And you can have a conversation with all of the regional ProComm teams around if that is an option for you to change it into an OpEx model. And we can speak to you around what that OpEx model looks like if you don't have those big security teams, etc. And the reason why we want you to change into a management platform instead of just doing, vulnerability assessments is because exactly that. It is a management of an environment. It is a continuous process of security teams making sure they do remediation on a monthly basis, weekly basis, etc. And it's important because when we look at what's happening globally, 375 new threats are released every minute. Domains are created, there's hosts created every single minute. So doing a vulnerability assessment on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis or twice a year, once a year, sometimes it's just not good enough because we see new threats released every single day, and you want a platform that will give you visibility immediately if something is released or there's new threats out there that you need to focus on, and make sure that the security teams are remediating and maintaining, safety within your environment. That is what we do. So we offer POVs, proof of values. When I started, it was called a POC. We call it POVs now. So proof of value is basically we create, you need to give us a virtual machine. It's a very small environment, 8 gigs of memory. I think we need about 50 gigs of hard drive space. We install the software within your environment. It takes about an hour to do the complete installation. And I think within 4 days, 5 days, we can start pulling reports around what your environment looks like, etc. So the ProComm team will work with them to do that within your environment, show you what that looks like. We normally use our executive summary reports as a motivation within the organization to get the budgets out, etc. And that is open. It is, of course, free. You don't have to pay for it. And there's no obligation in terms of, we're doing a POV and we need commercials within, a certain time frame. Those are specifically within your environment, what your requirements are, what you need to look at, etc. But we can have those calls separately with you as companies and identify what is your immediate need and where you want to go what do you want to do over the next 5 years? What do you want to do from a roadmap perspective? And us and ProComm can then obviously build that roadmap out with you and the security team and the CISO, so that we know exactly in the next 5 years, that's what we're going to do within your environment to create a holistic view to make sure that your entire environment is protected and covered. So if there's any questions, we're happy to take those questions now.
Thank you so much, Pierre, for that fantastic presentation. So if you have got a question, you can put up your hand. I hope we'll be able to admit you, or you can type in your question on the chat. Just maybe a question that some customers might have. Confirm, Pierre, that besides just scanning your environment and identifying those vulnerabilities, do you actually give advice in terms of how the customers can deal with those vulnerabilities that are identified?
Correct. So what will happen is, for instance, if you find a log4j vulnerability within your environment, we can click on that specific vulnerability. What TENABLE does is TENABLE will explain to you exactly why that vulnerability has a high rating. And how we explain it is basically the research team that has done research globally. When was that vulnerability last used to exploit or breach a organization? And we give you a clear guideline on what needs to be done with that specific vulnerability to remove it within your environment, whether that's a firmware update or just a patch within Microsoft. We give you a very clear indication of how to do that. And the security teams will then just use that guideline from a TENABLE perspective to make sure that vulnerability is removed within your environment.
Fantastic. And also the other thing I'm hearing from you is around the importance of vulnerability management, meaning that it is not a once-off exercise that organizations must do, but it is a continuous exercise that must be run continuously for a customer to understand their cybersecurity posture. Why do you think this is important for organizations to run a vulnerability management program instead of a once-off exercise?
I think there's different answers to that question. I think the first answer that I would have is, when we speak to our customers within the SADC region and globally, we understand that the security teams at this point in time is facing challenges around what they need to focus on and what is important. Now, TENABLE, if you buy the management platform, will give you a very clear guideline in terms of directing the security teams to focus on the most important things and the most important vulnerabilities within your environment. I think secondly, because these vulnerabilities or the breaches that are happening is happening on a daily basis, and there's people like, you can now do ransomware as a service, etc. The reason why it should be a management and not a once-off is because Log4j came out in December. There was a lot of breaches that happened within Log4j. If you're doing it on a quarterly basis or a yearly basis, you will find probably hundreds of Log4j vulnerabilities within your environment. And it gives people enough time to identify those vulnerabilities and breach organizations. So if you're doing it every 6 months, you basically have a timeline of 6 months for individuals to enter your organization using Log4j and doing lateral movements within your organization to get Active Directory. If you have a management platform, you can identify those vulnerabilities immediately, get alerts on those vulnerabilities immediately, and remediate those vulnerabilities immediately. So anything that is new, any new breaches that are happening globally, you have access to that via our research team. So you will have a notification around anything that happens globally immediately and remediate. So there's no gap in terms of where these people can, leverage a time frame within your organizations where no remediation is taking place.
Thank you so much. Good answer. The other question that maybe some kind of situation that they may be in is that maybe they might be running another vulnerability scanner now, and I've had some clients running open source tools as well. Is there any incentive for them moving over from whatever tool they are running now to Tenable that we can offer them?
So there's a lot of integration that happens with existing software that is running. So, and maybe what we will do after the webinar is we'll share that link because it's too big. There's so many out of the box integrations that we do with organizations like Checkpoint, Fortinet, IBM QRadar, etc. But when it comes to open source, what we would normally do, and I mean, we have competitors and we're quite transparent in terms of, who we deal with from a competitive landscape. My answer generally when you use an open source vulnerability management solution is let's compare apples with apples in terms of let's go in, do a POV, show you what your environment looks like, compare it to your open source vulnerability management solution that you're running now, see what we find and what you find from an open source perspective. And then obviously, the conversation from a commercial perspective, I'm the territory manager, Christo is the SE. We are in control of the budgetary figures, what discounts we can apply to make sure that organizations, it makes sense for them to buy a management platform. So first of all, I think let's run a POV, show you what Tenable does and what your open source vulnerability management solution does. There's value within Tenable, obviously, because, we're a big organization. We have a big research team. And then, once we've done the POV and we show you how Tenable works and how you can manage your vulnerabilities within the environment, then we can change it into a commercial discussion, which is a very open and transparent conversation.
Thank you so much. We've got some questions on the chat. The question is Tenable tools linked to the international security controls like the CIS NIST standards for compliance purposes? Maybe Christo, you can take that. I see you have already responded on chat, but maybe for the benefit of others, you can take that. And also someone has also brought up PCI DSS. Do you want to put your hand up, Christo, so we can admit you? Okay, I just made you a presenter. Hope you can unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Just give me a sec. Yeah, so just looking at let's start at the top. Sorry, I did answer some in the chat itself. So around the awareness, TENABLE and the likes of the partners like yourself, we do awareness quite a lot. So webinars like this is definitely a place to start. Subscribing to all TENABLE's content on pages like LinkedIn and Twitter and those places will, make you aware of all the webinars and things that's happening and provide you with our blogs and so forth. So that's for Marafu for the first question. I did answer Renette on the CIS and NIST standards. So that's included in the platform. You can do audit scans with the platform based on those standards, on those controls, exactly the same that the likes of KPMG and those guys will do. And 9 times out of 10, they use the Nessus scanner, right? So you'll be using the same technology as what they are using. And then, you can prepare yourself well to see what you are failing and what you are passing before they arrive, right? To make sure that you fix the most crucial things within your environment. And that's included within the platform. Marafa had another question on the vulnerabilities keeps on changing, the hackers becoming more innovative and so forth. Yes, our systems update every 24 hours with the new findings. So, if you have a new finding every 24 hours and you have automated scanning set up, at least weekly or bi-weekly, you will be, alerted and have that info within the platform to be able to act immediately before those attackers use these innovative techniques to infiltrate your environment, right? So we, with our research team, keep on updating every 24 hours. That's changing around the world, right? And then for Prosper, what about PCI DSS? Yes, that's also included in the platform. You can do PCI scanning with the platform, and you can even do the ASV portion where a TENABLE representative will check your compliancy and, within, I think the turnaround time is around 48 hours, send the report back to say, if you are failing or passing on your PCI DSS compliance as well. And that was the last question I do see in the chat.
Fantastic. Thanks, Crystal. I believe that's a very important question around compliance to standards and also the ability to print reports that obviously clients can present to executives and also to auditors around compliance. We understand this is important. Also, with the data privacy laws also coming up in every country, that also becomes critical. I don't know if there is any question again from anyone. Mr. Toronga, if you have any question or contribution, I don't know if you also, there are any challenges that clients are facing in terms of vulnerability management and scanning that we see TENABLE being able to address.
Yeah, thanks, Maggie. Thanks everyone for joining the session. Yes, it's really been a good presentation. I think most of the challenges that our customers actually face in the conversations that we have with them, I think the presentation today actually touched on some of those challenges and how TENABLE can actually address some of them. I think the bigger issue, obviously, we have most customers obviously want to see is the compliance. And then obviously from compliance, then obviously they start looking, and then in terms of security, what of those vulnerabilities that could actually cause impact on their environment so that they can remediate them in real time. And I think the message is very clear. Continuous vulnerability assessment is actually key to actually improve the cybersecurity posture of any organization. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will give Crystal a minute and Pierre on your parting shots to our clients in terms of what the trends you are seeing and clients doing in Africa? And any parting shots from you?
Yeah, if you don't have anything. So guys, from my side, we've showed you Tenable one that includes, of course, the enterprise platform, right? But what we see is a lot of times, it could be due to budget. It could be due to what is your most crucial need, right? You don't have to start with the enterprise platform. You can start with, and typically this is how it goes, is with vulnerability management of all your internal facing assets and external facing assets, right? Because those are the most important. And then secondly, what we pick up due to the fact that Active Directory is so important in the kill chain of an attacker, at some stage, the attacker needs to get hold of some credentials, right? That is basically the next in line. And I think, we've been busy quite a lot, and it's almost becoming a 50-50 in terms of doing proof of values, where half of them are done with vulnerability management that we do, and then the other half is the identity security for Active Directory, because of, Active Directory being so important. And that lapses group, they focus on Active Directory, and recently they hacked Cisco and Uber, which is very, very big organizations that you would imagine that those guys do have their security controls in place, right? So if they are, susceptible to these guys for Active Directory, that's the kind of the trending we see. That's the next focus, right? So vulnerability management first, internally, externally, and then secondly, looking at your Active Directory. So that's my closing remarks. Thank you.
Yeah, I think just from my side, we work with a lot of private and public companies in the SADC region. So if there's any customers that would like reference sites in terms of who we're working with within your countries, please feel free to reach out to the ProComm team. We can have a session with you separately around, the customers that we are looking after existing from a Tenable perspective. I think that's also really important. Just from a financial perspective, I mean, we work with all the major banks within the region. And then from a public sector perspective, we have extremely big organizations that, we're not only working with from a Tenable One perspective, but also from a vulnerability perspective, as Christo said, and an Active Directory perspective. So we do have a lot of reference customers within the region that is using the tool. And it's always great when customers speak to customers, because the references that we have from existing customers are always really good, and they always have very positive things to say about us as an organization. And I always say to customers, it's not only buying a product. There's a lot of stuff that happens in the back end. The partner that you're engaging with, the value that you're getting from a business partner perspective, number one. Number two, the back end. So our technical team that assists you when you do become a customer from a Tenable perspective, you get a customer success manager that is dedicated to your account. So any issues that you might have, or any questions that you might have, you can always go to the customer success manager. In saying that, we are a channel organization. So our first point of contact will always be our business partners in country. And, it's quite a strenuous sort of exercise to become a Tenable business partner. So ProComm, for instance, in this instance, is our business partner within country. They have skill. I've worked with them for many, many years. They're a very professional outfit. The engagements that we have from a ProComm perspective with our customers is always really professional, and we are very comfortable in ProComm assisting you in making sure that you manage your cyber exposure with all the other solutions that they're offering to you already. So happy to facilitate, assist, help, fly into country, come and see you guys personally, and we're at your beck and call. We're always available 24/7, almost like doctors these days. So any questions that you might have, please feel free to reach out to the ProComm team or to us, and we're happy to address any questions that you might have. I always say to people, don't reinvent the wheel. The issues that you as a customer are facing, are things that we deal with on a daily basis. We do this on a daily basis, identify issues on a daily basis. Your problems are not unique. Anything that you have, we probably have already fixed with other customers. So have those conversations. It's always important to, attend these webinars and have conversations with the likes of ProComm and TENABLE so that we can help you manage your environment a little bit better. And that's it from my side. And thank you once again for the ProComm team and for everybody attending. We really appreciate your time. We know it's always busy, so really appreciate it from a TENABLE perspective and from ProComm, organizing this and our DISTI exclusive networks.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, the last thing, I just wanted to repeat the last two questions that was in the chat. So Marafa had the question, who do we get in touch with? So the ProComm team, just let them know and they'll arrange the meetings from there. And Renette had a last question in terms of training. TENABLE does provide certified training for clients and organizations if they are interested when they do purchase the solution. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think the message is we need to improve our cyber resilience, and these are some of the tools that will help you with that. It costs organizations globally $4 million to recover from a breach, and to avoid obviously spending so much when an organization is compromised, one has to build this resiliency and reduce the exposure and the cost of a breach. So we're there to support you. Thank you so much for making time, and have a good day.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Goodbye.